What if the version of you living today isn't really you? Not your thoughts, not your values, not your desires. Just a script, installed quietly, by parents, teachers, lovers, all telling you who you should be, until you believed it. You didn't choose this identity. You inherited it, accepted it, adapted to it, because resisting it meant losing love, approval, safety. So you became what they needed and buried who you were. But here's the truth. Most people don't suffer because they're lost. They suffer because they're living someone else's idea of who they should be. In this video, we expose the invisible systems that programmed your identity and show you how to take it back, because until you know who you really are, you'll keep serving the role they cast you to play. 1. The false self. Identity as a survival mask. You weren't born with an identity. You were born with presence. Raw, undefined, unshaped. Then came the world, the rules, the expectations, the rewards for behaving, and the punishments for resisting. And piece by piece, you adapted. You smiled when you didn't want to. You stayed quiet when you wanted to scream. You took on labels. The strong one, the obedient one, the smart one, the troublemaker. Not because they were true, but because they were safe. You didn't become yourself. You became what others would accept. That's the false self. The identity built for survival, not for authenticity. And here's the catch. The more you perfected the mask, the more praise you got, the more attention, the more love. But deep down, something fractured, because every time you played the role, you quietly betrayed the parts of you that didn't fit the script. You hid your anger. You minimized your sadness. You silenced your voice. And over time, you forgot it was even a performance. It became your default, your personality, your truth. But it's not truth. It's trauma, adapted into identity. That's why even when life looks stable, you feel hollow, disconnected, unknown to yourself, because the version of you the world loves is the version you constructed to survive in it. And the real you, the one beneath the programming, is still waiting to be reclaimed. But to reclaim it, you must first understand how deeply the programming runs. 2. How others quietly program your identity. You didn't just wake up one day and become who you are. You were trained, conditioned, scripted. It started with voices you trusted, voices that shaped the blueprint of who you believed you were allowed to be. First, family, the first programmers. Before you had language, you were already absorbing labels. You're the quiet one. You're always so dramatic. You're the smart one, not the creative one. You always make things harder than they need to be. And because you were a child, you didn't question. You absorbed, you aligned, you became. Not because it was true, but because it was safe. Because when a child's truth threatens connection, they will always choose attachment over authenticity. Second, society, the reinforcement system. School, culture, religion. They don't ask who you are. They tell you who to be. Sit still, follow rules, be nice, don't question, smile, performance. If you conform, you're praised. If you rebel, you're punished. Simple, systematic, effective, and slowly you build a personality designed not to express selfhood, but to survive approval systems. 3. Manipulators, the identity hijackers. Then come the ones who exploit the identity you've already built. They see the cracks. They test your boundaries. They reward your compliance. They say things like, "You're the only one who understands me. You're so good at fixing things. Don't stop now. Without me, you'd fall apart." They don't control you by force. They control you by telling you who you are, until you start believing it. Because once your identity is wrapped around their validation, you'll do anything not to lose it, even if it means staying small, staying quiet, staying broken. This is how it works. Label, reinforcement, internalization, obedience. And because it's done slowly, repeatedly, emotionally, you don't see it as manipulation. You see it as who you are. But here's the truth. If your identity is based on staying liked, being needed, avoiding rejection, or keeping the peace, you're not living. You're just maintaining a mask they taught you to wear. The scariest prison is the one where the bars are made of compliments and the lock is made of love. Because no one escapes a cage. They don't realize they're in. 3. Signs you're living a programmed identity. Most people don't realize they're acting because the script feels so familiar, so rehearsed, so rewarded. It passes as truth. But if you look closer, you'll start to see the cracks. Here are the signs you're not living authentically, but performing an identity that was given to you. 1. You apologize for existing. You say sorry when you've done nothing wrong. You shrink in conversation. You hesitate to take space. Why? Because somewhere along the way, you were programmed to believe that being visible equals being a problem, that your presence is a burden, that your voice is too much. So you minimize yourself to stay acceptable. 2. You seek permission to be yourself. You wait for someone else to validate your choices. You ask for approval before making decisions. You fear judgment more than regret. That's not confidence. That's conditioning. The belief that your worth is dependent on someone else's reaction. So instead of leading your life, you manage their perception. 3. You feel guilt when you say no. Every boundary feels like betrayal. You say yes when you want to say no, then resent yourself for it. Why? Because your identity has been wired to equal compliance. Disagreeing means rejection. Assertion means conflict. So you conform, not from kindness, but from survival. 4. You don't know what you really want. You've been so busy being what others expect, you never stop to ask, what do I want? What do I believe? Who am I without the roles? And when you finally sit in silence, you feel lost. Because when the mask comes off, you realize there's no face beneath it, just fragments waiting to be reclaimed. 5. You call it just who I am, but it feels like a trap. You say, I've always been the responsible one. I'm just a people pleaser. I'm not the type to speak up. But pay attention. Does saying that feel like freedom or like resignation? Because identity shouldn't feel like confinement. And if it does, you're not owning yourself. You're protecting the program. That was built to keep you small. You can only pretend for so long before the body starts to rebel. Anxiety, burnout, disconnection. These aren't random. They're the symptoms of a self trying to break free from a life it didn't choose. And until you see the script, you can't rewrite it. 4. the psychological tools used to keep you in character. Once they assign you a role, they don't need to force you to play it. They just use psychological tools to make sure you never leave the stage. No chains, no cages, just perfectly calibrated emotional levers. Here's how they keep you in character. First, guilt, the invisible handcuff. You say no dash. They look hurt. You set a boundary. They call you selfish. You pull away. They remind you of everything they've done for you. Guilt is powerful because it doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to make you feel like you're the bad one for choosing yourself. And once you internalize that, you'll stay in role just to avoid the weight of self-blame. 2. Shame, the identity cement. Guilt says you did something wrong. Shame says you are something wrong. Shame turns behavior into identity. You always overreact. You're too emotional. You're weak. You're just like your father. It attaches failure to your name. So even when you try to change, you carry the belief that you are fundamentally broken, and no one escapes a role they think defines them. 3. Gaslighting, reality rewriting. You challenge the script. They deny it ever existed. You express pain dash. They say you're imagining it. You question the label. They call you dramatic. Gaslighting isn't about argument. It's about distortion. They twist the memory, rewrite the context, until you doubt your own perception. And once you can't trust your reality, you surrender to their version of who you are. 4. Emotional withdrawal, silence as punishment. You step out of role. They go silent, cold, distant. They don't yell, they just vanish emotionally. And because you've been conditioned to link love with obedience, you return to character, just to feel connected again. This isn't affection, it's training. 5. Reward conditioning, praise as a trap. When you play the role well, they flood you with affection, validation, attention. You're amazing. I knew you could handle it. No one else gets me like you do. The praise feels good, but it's conditional, only offered when you're compliant. Predictable, controllable. It's not love, it's reinforcement. And once you crave the high, you become addicted to approval, even if it costs you your authenticity. 6. Fear of abandonment, the ultimate control lever. They never say it directly, but the message is clear. If you stop playing the role, you'll be alone, and for a self that was programmed. To equate connection with survival, that threat is enough. To silence every rebellion. You stay, you submit, you perform. Not because you want to, but because you fear the void. On the other side of truth, these aren't random behaviors, they're systems, built to mold you, shape you, and keep you in character, without bars, without noise. That's the most dangerous kind of manipulation, the one that doesn't feel like control, it feels like love. 5. How to deprogram the identity they built. You've been playing a role that was never yours, built from fear, rewarded by others, reinforced by silence, guilt, and shame. But the mask can come off. The script can be burned. If you're willing to deprogram. Here's how. 1. Identify the role you've been playing. Start with the question, what do people expect me to be? The fixer? The quiet one? The good child? The strong one who never breaks? Trace it. Where did that role come from? Who benefits from you staying in it? What happens when you step out of it? Awareness is the beginning of extraction. 2. Separate identity from survival strategy. You're not too much. You're expressive. You're not cold. You're cautious. You're not selfish. You're self-aware. Most of what they labeled you was just your nervous system trying to survive. So ask, is this who I am, or who I became to avoid conflict, rejection, or abandonment? The moment you stop defending the role, you start discovering the self. 3. Challenge the reward system. When you do something authentic and the praise disappears, don't flinch. That discomfort, it's withdrawal from the drug of approval. Let it burn, let it pass. Because every time you act without needing applause, you reclaim ownership over your behavior. Power isn't in being liked, it's in being true without apology. 4. Redraw the boundary between you and them. Your identity is not public property. It doesn't exist to make others feel comfortable. So stop asking, will they approve of this? Start asking, does this reflect who I am without the script? Set boundaries. Speak when it shakes the room. Say no without explaining. The more discomfort you create in those who shaped your false self, the closer you are to the real one. 5. Reclaim the right to change. You don't owe consistency to anyone. You can be quiet yesterday, bold today, detached last year, intimate now. You are not bound to the version they memorized. You're allowed to evolve. Because authenticity isn't fixed, it's chosen. Moment by moment, and every time you choose it, you deprogram another layer of the identity they built for you. This is how you take your selfhood back, not by fighting the old role, but by refusing to play it. Not by screaming who you are, but by living it quietly, without needing permission. Final CTA. They gave you a role. You played it well. So well, in fact, you forgot it was never yours. But now you see it. The script, the labels, the rewards for staying small. And once you see it, you have a choice. You can keep performing, or you can reclaim yourself. You don't need to announce it. Just act differently. Say no without guilt. Speak without shrinking. Withdraw without apologizing, because the most powerful shift isn't loud. It's subtle, invisible, undeniable. It's when you no longer seek permission to be who you are. That's when the real identity emerges. Unfiltered, uncontrolled, unapologetic. But once you become real, they'll try to test you, push you, bait you into reaction. That's when you must move, like a shadow. In the next video, you'll learn how to control any dynamic without confrontation. How to bend the room without touching a single wall. It's called the Shadow Strategist. Because true power doesn't argue. It moves in silence and rewrites everything around it.